Alright guys, so here we are in our new video. We are in sections 13.1 through 13.3, which is Principles of Ecology. Our key concepts. Ecology is a study of relationships among organisms and their environment. Every ecosystem includes both the living and the non-living factors, and life in an ecosystem requires a source of energy. Okay, we've got quite a few different vocabulary words. A lot of them you're already familiar with because you've learned about ecosystems since you were in middle school. So here's our vocabulary. We've got ecology, community, ecosystem, biome, organism, population, biosphere, biotic, abiotic, biodiversity, keystone species, producer, autotrophs, consumers, heterotrophs, photosynthesis, and chemosynthesis. Our essential questions, so this is what I want you to think about because you need to be able to answer this by the time we are done with today's presentation, is how do Earth's living and non-living parts interact and affect the survival of the organisms? So everything working together, the living and the non-living parts. So ecologists study environments at different levels of organization. And when we study the environment, we study ecology. Ecology is the study of the interactions among living things and between those living things and their surroundings. Now we're going to look at the different parts of our Earth. So as you know, an organism is an individual living thing. In my picture, my example is an alligator. A population is a group of the same species that live in one area. So all of the alligators that live in that area would be a population of alligators. Okay. Now, community is a group of different species that live together in one area. So that would include the alligators, the birds, the fish, the turtles that all live in the same area. That's the community. And then we have our ecosystem. The ecosystem includes all the living things, so all the organisms, as well as the non-living things like the climate, the soil, rocks, water, all of the other non-living things in that area. Finally, we have, well, almost finally, a biome. So a biome is a major regional or global community of organisms characterized by the climate conditions and plant communities that thrive there. So we can categorize different ecosystems into different biomes, like a rainforest biome, a marine biome, an Arctic biome, a tundra biome, temperate forest biome, all of those different things. We can kind of guess like what kind of conditions we would see there. Now, as we learned at the very, very beginning of the year, we talked about the biosphere, and the biosphere is the life-supporting portions of the Earth that are composed of the air, the land, the water, the fresh water, and the salt water. Okay, remember the air, the atmosphere, the land, the lithosphere, and then the water is the hydrosphere. When scientists study ecology, mostly they do observational data. So they do observation, they do experiment, and they do modeling. So observation is the act of carefully watching something over time. Scientists write those down, take notes on what they observe. And observations of populations can be done by visual surveys. And we can do direct surveys for easy to spot species by looking at binoculars, finding things. And then we can do indirect surveys, looking for things like that are hard to find. So we have to look for signs like footprints, their scatter, their stool, things that they might have eaten, bones. Those would be indirect surveys. And experiments can be performed in the lab or in the field. Lab experiments obviously give researchers more control. We can't always do a lab experiment to actually see how nature works because it wouldn't be nature. It's a controlled experiment inside a lab. So field experiments give a much more accurate picture of natural interactions that are happening in our ecosystems. Now, our field experiments may not always help us determine the actual cause and effect because there's a lot of different factors that play into that. We can also use computers and mathematical models to describe and model nature. And modeling allows scientists to learn more about an organism or ecosystems in ways that would not be possible in natural or lab settings. Now, when we talk about an ecosystem, we include both biotic and abiotic factors. And what exactly are those? Well, biotic factors are all the living things. Remember, bio means life. So biotic factors are living things. So all the plants and the animals. fungus, bacteria, all of those things would be living things in our environment. Then we have our abiotic factors. Abiotic, A for not bio-life, so non-living factors. They're the non-living things in our ecosystem. We've got moisture, temperature, wind, sunlight, soil, all of those different things are the abiotic factors, non-living portions of our ecosystem. Changing one factor in ecosystem can affect many other factors. And biodiversity, like we learned at the very beginning of the year, remember life, biodiversity, differences? Biodiversity is assortment or variety of living things in an ecosystem. And as you know, which we looked at the very beginning of the year, the rainforests have way more biodiversity than other locations in the world because of that very well-suited climate. Lots of things can grow and thrive there because it's right along the equator where it's warm and moist. So those rainforests have a lot more biodiversity, but they are threatened by human activities. When we talk about things in our ecosystem, sometimes we can talk about these things called keystone species. A keystone species is a species that has an unusually large effect on its ecosystems. They help to form and maintain a very complex web of life. And if you remove that keystone species from that ecosystem, it can really be harmful. So a keystone is actually, if you look at my picture here, it's that middle stone holding up the arch. And this whole arch, if we were to take this middle stone, it would fall apart, okay? Because that is actually holding all the weight and balancing both sides of that archway. So the keystone species is just like that. If we remove it from the ecosystem, that balance in that ecosystem has been lost. And so something really detrimental or bad might happen. Producers provide energy for other organisms in an ecosystem. Now, producers are things that get energy from non-living resources. Producers are also called autotrophs because they make their own food. Auto for self, troph for nutrition or feeding. So, autotrophs, self-feeding or self-nutrition. They make their own food. Things like plants are an autotroph. We can also, like I said, call them producers. Now, we have these other things in the ecosystem called consumers. Consumers consume. They eat other things. So consumers eat other organisms. Consumers are organisms that get their energy by eating other living or once living resources. We can also call them heterotrophs. Hetero for other or different, and troph for nutrition or feeding because they feed off of different things. Now, almost all producers obtain energy from the sun. So they do photosynthesis. We learned about photosynthesis already. So photosynthesis in most producers uses sunlight as an energy source. Now we also have some producers that do not get sunlight. They never see the sun. And so they do another process called chemosynthesis, where they use chemicals as an energy source. Okay, so these are all the basic things from Principles Ecology. We're going to learn a little bit more on how these things interact in our next presentation, which will be 13.4 and 13.6. If you have any questions, please let me know.